I remember feeling like everything outside my life that wasn't cinema was kind of this void, relationships, family connections, everything. It was probably that necessary period where you have to sort of separate yourself from everything you knew before, or as you sort of define yourself as an adult. I have a lot of sympathy for people in their 20s who are sort of wanting to do something different or discover what they're most passionate about or live a life of purpose, or that, they feel like what they're doing with their time is valuable to themselves or their community. If you just go straight to business school and get a job and get married, there's always, that's the typical track, but there's always going to be people who, are looking for something else, or, they're having a lengthy existential crisis about what anything means. And I don't know, I've always had a soft spot for that because that was really me. I mean, although I have to say cinema was the thing that saved me, or that I was always into from age 20 on. I had that kind of focus. What engaged me was film, which is a great thing to fill up your entire life because it encompasses everything. I often joke when people ask if I went to film school, I say, I went to the Stanley Kubrick Film School, which means you just buy a camera and you learn how to use it and you start making movies. And that's as good as anything else. I mean, I lived near the University of Texas Film School, had a lot of friends who went to school there, and I would sit in on classes. I'd go to student film. I was I felt I had some connection there, even though I was never enrolled. I'd go to student short screenings and certainly watched thousands of films on campus. But as far as my own stuff goes, I had a personality. I think I just wanted to do it on my own. I didn't really want to be judged. I was naturally very shy. And what I felt I wanted to do, I knew wouldn't fit into that. I guess I'm always anti-institutional. I've never really gotten along in the academic environment too well. Not that I'm some big radical or anything. It just always kind of bugged me. I felt like there was some kind of, constraints there that I didn't really want to listen to. And I think for film, you don't really need necessarily that. If you're a self-motivated person, which you need to be for film anyway, that's lesson number one. It's not like you get your degree and then the industry gives you this or that. Or, if you're ever really going to write and direct movies and get your own movies made, you have to be, a hustler. You got to be kind of obsessively motivated. School's not going to teach you that or give you those skills. You just kind of have to do it. I have a lot of sympathy for filmmakers making their first films because it's so much work to pull it together. You're kind of finding out what you don't know, which is endless. It's hard to be a leader. It's hard to communicate with people. I cut so much of that out of my dialogue altogether. Like, okay, I can't communicate with anyone about my own ideas, so I'm going to just do this film alone. I don't want to even deal with anybody. I don't want to explain anything to anyone. I don't know how to even talk to anyone about what I'm thinking. So I'm just going to do this alone and see what happens. There were some filmmakers I liked quite a bit who had done that more or less. So I thought, okay, well, that's challenge number one. I'll do every technical element of this movie. I'll shoot it, light it where necessary. I'd like to not light too much. I'll, obviously edit it. I'll do the soundtrack. I'll do everything. I'll do, whatever sound work, everything about it. So that was a nice little crash course in filmmaking. Just that all these years later, I consider and go, well, yeah, I can, I can do all these things. I really can. I can record sound. I can, it's not my forte. It's not what I enjoy doing, but I can do, having done it a lot, everything, that you kind of go into something confident. You know what everybody you're working with is up against. So the value of well-recorded sound when you've spent a year kind of looping or trying to make something work better. I'm talking about my first two films here. So, it was a nice technical challenge for myself, and also it was kind of fun going through life thinking, okay, I'm working on something bigger. How, and to be engaged in a work in an ongoing process. And I shot this primarily over about a 1-year period. A year or so after I moved here, I, started wanting to see more films. I was watching 3 films a day, and then there were certain directors I wanted to see more work of, and the Austin Film Society kind of grew out of that. Started showing a lot of movies from directors. You You want to see more Bergman films than just The Seventh Seal and Wild Strawberries. You know, where's all the other films? You want to see more experimental films or documentaries or kind of cult films. And this was before everything was on video. So there was this great need, and I was lucky to fall in with some like-minded friends who, you know, we all were sort of, you know, raging with the ideas of film, and, you know, it was just a great period in my life. You know, myself, roommates, Lee Daniel, I had a roommate, Brecht Anders, and, you know, it was just, film was it, you know. In a music town like Austin, we were the film guys. And there was a circle around us of people who kind of came and went, usually living in our house. You know, it was just a really kind of an exciting time. Like a whole world had opened up. And I'll never forget it. It was just, you know, I just would spend all my time reading about film or, you know, watching movies. And, you know, that's just what we did. We showed films and promoted them and talked about films and went to every film, and that was life. It was pretty damn great. Film had sort of taken hold of me as worth my time, you know, like it just was a matter of seeing masterpieces and, you know, interesting films that I'd never seen before. I just hadn't been exposed to them. And I quickly started going to the library and checking out books on the French New Wave, or I would go home and, you know, I'd reference like a director or a studio, a writer, actors. I was just kind of, you know, just interested. I was kind of pouring through it all in my own academic way, studying everything that I had seen, or I was just kind of devouring everything around me, I guess, looking back, to do with like the history of film and, you know, different national cinemas. And I remember I had one book that I'd gotten through a book club or something. It was sitting there on my shelf, and it was called The Technical Aspects of Filmmaking. And I'd look at it fairly regularly. I'm like, okay, I'm going to wait for you. I'm not going to read you just yet. I'm going to do another year of history, you know, film history. And I was doing my own version of film appreciation. This movie, It's Impossible to Learn to Plow by Reading Books, I would consider in my own world like my graduate thesis. I had made all these undergraduate films just on my own. You know, they're not even experiments. I call them technical experiments. I'd made a lot of films. I'd do a whole film just for editing, or a whole film just for lighting or camera movement. You know, I'd get a friend to push me in a dolly, or, you know, I was just, you know, trying to, you know, just learn all the elements of filmmaking. They were just technical exercises. I was amazed looking back how much patience I had to not crave immediate results. I knew they wouldn't be forthcoming. I knew enough about the history of film and studying filmmakers' lives that it wasn't something that just came overnight. There's not really prodigy filmmakers in the way there are in, you know, in music and other art disciplines. It's kind of so all-encompassing. It's rare you see a young filmmaker. I mean, there's a lot of young filmmakers, and a lot of young people obviously, you know, achieved a lot in film. But I don't know. I knew I wouldn't be one of those. I knew that I was coming to it late. It just wasn't going to be. But I'm thankful for my background now, that I wasn't a guy at 9 years old who knew he wanted to make films and was filming blowing up his train set. And I never came at it from that. I came at it more literature, philosophy, theater was kind of my background before I discovered cinema. So I was always kind of coming at it from more of a theoretical standpoint, without being a, you know, semiotician or an academic, because I'm far from that. I'm fairly inarticulate. I'm not, you know, I'm an autodidact, which means I can't pronounce certain European people's names correctly. I'm really sketchy on my own education. It's all just been my own reading, and so I don't feel like I've, you know, I'm kind of splotchy when it comes to the academia. But, you know, it's been my own subjective path, that has its own merits too. Whatever gaps it leaves you, at least you know your own learning has been yours. You know, it's been, this is what I was interested in. Here's a filmmaker I really liked, and here's who he liked, and they taught me this, and I went from there to there, and here's a writer I liked who, you know, so, you know, you're on your own subjective learning path. There's no overnight success. There's no idiot savant filmmakers. There's no, it's not going to work like that. It's a lot of work, and people don't want to hear that. They want to think, oh, you just did it. Wow. It's like Harry Potter. Remember when J.K. Rowling, they figured, oh, she was on The Dole. Oh, well, she's been writing since she was a kid, They want to think, oh, I could be on The Dole. Maybe I could be a best-selling writer. It's like, no, you probably can't. So, yeah, no one wants to think how they would have to alter their life, because by the time, say, Slacker came out, I could honestly say I've put in more time in the last 9 years or whatever into cinema than anyone could, 20 hours, 18 hours a day, my whole life, every day, for all those years was 100% devoted to cinema. All my own projects, things I was working on, watching movies, reading, that was my crash course over many, many years. So, I crammed in a lot in those years. So, in some way, it's kind of insulting when you're sort of treated, every actor, everybody who's ever gotten to some level, you're treated like the overnight success, but you in your heart know that's not the case. You see these films and you go, wow, that's really great what they're doing. And then you think, well, in a way, that seems accessible. Like I can get a 16mm camera and maybe I can do that. And I was, flattered years later when people come up to me and say Slacker was that film to them. They saw Slacker and thought, oh, I can do that too. Which is, it's a compliment, sometimes a backhand compliment, by saying, oh, if you can do that, it's not that impressive, I can do that too. So it's, Kevin Smith talks about that. Like people see Clerks and, well, boy, shit, man, I can't do any worse than, technically than that. But what they can't do is write dialogue like that quite often, or there's always something beyond that makes it a little more difficult than the viewer thinks. The biggest misconception is people see someone's first film and they think that's what they did on their first day as a filmmaker. So when people were treating me like when I did Slacker, like I just picked up a camera 5 minutes before, I always was really insistent on telling them, no, I've been doing this for a long time, actually. I did a Super 8 feature before this. I've done, I have a closet full of shorts. I've been at this, years and years at this point. As alienated as I was from everything in my 20s, I remember I was lucky to come from a very nice family that didn't give me too much shit. I mean, there's subtle hostilities about me not doing anything with my life, but I don't think they gave me... I wasn't asking them for any money, I guess, but I don't know. I was lucky to live in a tolerant atmosphere of a town like Austin, where it's okay to be a grad student until you're 40 or whatever. You have 380 hours of school and not have graduated because you were lacking one requirement or something. You can just sort of hang out in coffee shops and, have a little job, a TA or, whatever, and live your life. But family pressure is worse usually than societal pressure, as we all know. And I feel pretty blessed that a few people... even though I was officially a college dropout and was underachieving and had nothing to show for myself through most of my 20s, that they were kind of like, oh, well, you're doing what you want. My mom and grandmother especially, I remember thinking they were cool. Dad had to be a little more like, well, you should kind of maybe think about getting back in school. Just that kind of friendly advice about subtly getting your act together. And a career in the arts wasn't really a very plausible or practical goal, and it's not. But I remember not caring, It's like I was content to live in a hole, read, watch movies, and, get money wherever you could get it. It was fun to try to explore, I wouldn't do anything else. It was like a good foundation to what I would try to be doing later. But at the time, I didn't know there'd be a later. I really thought this would be the only film I ever made, quite possibly. And if so, that I wanted to, just be honest with myself and go, oh, I made a film once. I'd be older going, I made the film once. And, that was my life at that time. I think if I hadn't had the outlet, of film, I would have been probably in more trouble on a lot of levels. If I wouldn't have found cinema and been really obsessed with that, or, thinking I could make films, or that was my outlet. That was a good, safe place to put all your energy. And it's a good place because it requires all your energy and everything you might possibly have.